Welcome to Actual Scale Modelling. This is part 2 of the Eduard Danger Zone F14 build. Now in part 1 I dealt with the cockpit and the landing gear. In this part I'm going to be carrying on putting the cockpit into the fuselage and possibly getting onto the wings. Well, I'll see how it goes. I've decided to change it up a little. Initially I was just going to have this model on its wheels. I'm still going to have it on its wheels, but looking more into the instructions this morning, I've noticed there's an option for it to be fully open. There's certain compartments that can be no open and things like that, and I think it looks really interesting. So that's what I'm going to be concentrating on for part 2. So let's get on with the build. Beginning with the fuselage for the cockpit wall, and I'm just taking my hobby knife here and cleaning up all the little burrs that come off from the sprue, and then going on to rescribing the parallel lines, just following the markings on the mould, just a very gentle scrape along those markings. I'm using Tamiya's X2 white to paint inside this unit here, and this is for, I think, the refueling connector. Still using the Tamiya X2 white, painting in the compartments inside of the fuselage. These will be kept open, and then it's Revit Aquacolor 08 matte black just to highlight certain details on the refueling connector. So I painted the other side panels and things like that in the Tamiya X2 white, and mostly done on sprue here just to save time. Then once that's painted, I'm going over it with Tamiya's Weathering Master Series E, and I'm using the green component again to highlight the panel as I go along. I fitted the refueling connector and bay, but later on I took it off because while handling the model the thing moved even though it's set, so before I broke it I decided to take it off. I only mention it now because you maybe get a bit confused and wondering where it's gone halfway through the build. Fitting the nose cone part here, this is the bracket that allows the nose cone to move. The front gear landing assembly subpart bonds together with the cockpit subpart before fitting in to the fuselage. And once it was dry, it's time to put it in. Now just be careful the location points here. There is a little markings inside and points where holds in place, but you do have to get it accurate or the landing gear won't fit. And once it's on, it's time to close it up. Now I would recommend not waiting until the landing gear and cockpit is actually fully set, just in case you need to move it around and have a little play around with it to get it to fit. I didn't have this problem, but you can definitely see it. Now you see the problem I'm having there with the refueling connector probe. In the end, as I said, I took it off, but the two fuselage parts bonded together really well, and once it was dry it was a simple case of sanding down the seam lines. They weren't too prominent, just a light sanding was all was needed. Tamiya's F14 dark iron is getting used for the gun system inside. Now this goes inside the compartments that I painted white on the fuselage. There's about 4 or 5 different little parts you have to bond together for the gun. The straightforward assembly. Yeah, there's just different brackets and things that go on each end. Make them up and then put them on as this straightforward assembly. Once you've got the sub-assemblies done, they just push together with a little bit of cement. I'm using a Revit Aquacolor 90 silver to paint this container. I think it holds the ammo for the gun, and it's the same colour for the gun's cap at the end that I'm using. Doesn't really specify a colour, so I just thought I'd paint it silver. For the bottom part of this sub-assembly, you have to drill a couple of holes depending on what weapons and that you're putting on. So I'm just using my pin drive to do this. There is location points so that you can't go wrong. And then once that was drilled, it was time to start painting up. So I'm using Tamiya's X2 white, and this area that I'm painting here is where the landing gear main unit would sit into. Back to the guns now. Once it was all dry, it's time to place them in. So I'm putting in the canister first. There is two little holes for location points on this. Next is the actual gun. Now there's a bracket that has to go to hold the gun. I recommend you putting that in first, but before it sets, put in the gun. The reason for that is it's a bit tricky to get in, so you want the bracket in position but not set, so you can just move it out the way like that and place it in. You can't really get the bracket in once the gun's in, so don't put the gun in then the bracket. You'll find you won't be able to get it in properly. Now that's in, just placing the bottom section on. This just slides on without any problem. The landing gear back support hooks into it, and there's a little location point right at the recess where the landing gear strap would go. Next one is the front camera, and depending on what variant you're going to be doing is which one you'll put in. There is a couple of options here. Onto the wings then, and you have different options here whether you want to have the flaps open or closed. I'm having mine open, so I'm just starting to assemble. The first bracket goes in. There's a couple of options that you can do with this, so pay attention to the instructions to what variant and style you want. I'm using Rebel Aquacolor 31 Fire Red to paint the area where the flap's going. If you're having it fully closed, you won't have to do this. Because I'm having it open, I'm painting it. Why it's red, I don't know, but that's the colour it's calling for. And once it's dry, it's time to join the two halves together. They fitted really well. No major issues whatsoever on it. Then onto the flaps, just two parts here bonded together. And once it's set, time to join it to the wing. Again, the location points fit really well. Again, be careful with the angle that you're putting these in. I'm putting mine slightly down in the landing position, but if you haven't in flight, make sure you get them straight. And then for the last part of the wing is the front flap. Again, I'm having mine open so you can see the red stripe, but you can have it fairly closed if you wish. Onto the main body. Now there's several holes that I have to drill here for the weapons. Again, depending on what weapons you have is what holes you'll drill, but it's all clearly marked on the instructions with the location points, so you should be okay. The next stage, you have to be particularly careful. There's a part that you have to cut off. There's no guidelines or nothing to cut this part off, so you have to do it by eye, by touch, by feel, whatever. But look at the instructions. It tells you to cut it off. It's for the wings to fit. So I took my hobby knife and just scraped it along until I got the desired depth. Now using Rebel Aquacolor 31 Fire Red, and this is for the wind brakes, the two fins here, and also on the fuselage. I'll get painted in the same colour. While I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm using Tamiya's X2 white for the air intake in our components here, and there's a few things you have to put together here, and all gets painted in the same colour. I was actually running out of the Tamiya X2 white, so I've changed over to Umbro 34 white matte, and I'll give it a gloss coat at the end for it to become shiny. There's no difference apart from one being gloss and one's being white, and I actually laid down better on this one. So once I painted the inner flow air directors, I went on to the main component of the air intake and just painting the same colour. There's four little pistons that go inside the bottom part of the assembly for the main intake. This is to help you guide the air directional plates. Now I did paint these, but you actually can't see them, so I wouldn't bother painting them. That's why I'm not putting up the paint list for them. And as I say, there's 4, and the location points there for them, and they just stick out in a V shape for you to put the directional plates on. So for each one, there's 2 components to this. The first part, the longer one, goes in first. It butts against the line at the front of the air intake, and it sits on the piston, as you can see there. Now there is a little bracket underneath this part so that you can put the piston on. Then you go on to fitting the second part, which you can see it goes in a downward fashion. So just marry it up to the little piston points and it will just fit in. So while that's drying, then take the opportunity to put in the air brakes, and got the little pistons again here, putting in to hold the flap open, and then there's the bottom stabilizers going on. There's a recess they just fit in, so there's no actual location points. It's just like a little groove that the whole piece fits into. Now it's time for the cover of the air intake. Now they do have little location bracket points for you to put on, but you may have to squeeze the unit to get it to fit in. Just be patient with it, it does fit in, and make sure the sloping vanes at the front do line up, because you don't want them moving around, especially when you bond the 2 fuselage parts together. Going on to the landing gear now. I'm using Tamiya's F14 Sky Grey to paint the main strut of the landing gear. I pre-painted all the little parts with Tamiya's X2 white, and these are all the little brackets and things that go onto the landing gear. There's quite a lot of items that go making up into the landing gear. Just be mindful where each position goes. Dry fit where possible, because you can easily get mixed up on this sub-assembly. Make sure if you're putting anything on that you can move it. Don't put it on and wait to set, then put another part on, because you may have to maneuver the tiny little parts into position to connect with the other parts. As you can see what I'm doing with these 2 parts here, they join together. So put them on and just squeeze them together like that. Making up the landing gear bays now. They're fairly simple to make up. You have the sidewalls fitting onto the main part, but a word of caution here. Now I made these up, then fitted them. Now I followed the instructions directly how to do it. I believe there's a better way to do it. I had a hell of a time getting these in. In fact, I had to disassemble part of the bay here to get it to fit. So I would highly recommend doing this part on the actual model itself, the lower half of the fuselage of the main body, because it was so difficult to get it to fit. There was so much jiggling about, and it's just the nature. It's a really tight area to get them into, and if you don't get 100% accurate, it's not going to fit. Obviously I didn't. Now while I was waiting that to dry, I used Tamiya's X2 white to paint the inner walls of the wheels. Now I'm using the plastic, I'm not using the resin parts here, only because of this point. I didn't see the point in using the resin part, then painting in the tile. May as well use the rubber tile supplied, which only fits on the plastic part. It's time to put in the strut into the landing gear bay. There's a couple of location points. It's fairly straightforward, it just fits in. Make sure it's completely bonded if you're doing it this way. Next to go on is this sidewall. It runs from the landing gear right over to the landing gear bay. Now I particularly had a problem with this part, getting it to fit onto the main body. So again, I would recommend you fit this onto the main body to build the bay up. So the two inner parts of the wheels are dry now, so it's time to place on the tyre. It's just a simple case of pressing them onto it. Then once that's on, I just pushed it into the strap for the landing gear. Next to go assembled was the fans for the jet, and these are getting painted in Rebel 91 steel. Now there's two parts to that. Again, I'm using the plastic and not the resin. It depends on what you want to use, really. You know, but it's a simple case of painting them, then joining them into the unit. So once they're dry, I put the first part into the recess at the main unit here. There's a little lip, it just fits right into it. And once I was on, it was just marrying up the other half. Now it's time to put in the landing gear bays in. I cemented the surrounding area first of all, before placing the main unit on. You have to angle it to get the wheel in. Once I was saying, I thought, yeah, okay, then that's okay. I goes in, I looked alright, but when I turned it upside down, there was massive gapping issues, because it's just the nature on how it fits. Because it's on so many different levels and shapes inside this bay, it was just really difficult to get them to line up, because I pre-assembled. This is why I would say assemble it. I've had a look at it, and you can easily assemble it onto the actual main unit itself, then put in the landing gear struts. So that was me there moving around the parts I'd already made, trying everything to get it to fit. But I eventually did get it to fit, and then it was time to put in the next part of the air and taking the jet. These only go in one particular way. There's a round section to a flat section, top and bottom. Make sure the round part goes at the bottom. Well, if you don't, it just wouldn't fit. Then it's back to Rebel Aquacolor 31 for Aero Red for the air brake upper half of the fuselage. So the inner compartment and the flaps get painted on this colour. Just be careful again where you're painting. There's all certain parts, but it's very easy to follow. Next to go on is the covers for the wings. There's 4 of these to put on, 2 for each section of the fuselage. There is little location brackets you put on, but just make sure it marries up with the top. You can push this down so it slopes down, which will cause you a problem later on. For the air brake pistons, I'm painting it in Rebel Aquacolor 90 silver and Rebel Aquacolor 08 matte black. There's 2 little air intakes that go on the front here, easy enough to put on. Next to go on is all the tiny little airfoils and points like that. I decided to put them on now, because last time I left them off, I forgot to put on a couple. Now, depending on the positioning of the air brake, is where you put the pistons. These ones go slightly straight up, just at a slight angle really, and then the main flap just connection points just rest in the recess, and then just gently lay it down flat onto your piston. Next 2 parts after the wall, there's a little pin at the front that I recommend you use as your guide before placing it in. The back what fits onto the landing gear bay. Don't worry if it sort of pops up a little bit. I think it's meant to do that. Next is putting on the wings. Now you can have these wings moving if you wish. There's a little bracket there that they just push onto before you put in the cap to seal it off so that they don't pop out. And just glue the inner part of this. You don't want any cement on the outside if you want your wings to move. So just a little touch of glue, and then put in the cap and just press it down. That's all it needs. And once the wings are on, it is time to bond the two main fuselages together. It went on fairly easy. I'd recommend starting from the rear part of the engine block first, because there's a good stable base that you can start bonding it to. Then work your way up as you go along. You may need a couple of clips here. I put some on just as a temporary measure, but you'll definitely need some at the front. And I think I'll bring it a close now for this section. It's a good place to stop. So with this section, I had one or two little problems along the way. Not sure whether that was my fault or the instructions whatever concerning the landing gear bay, but I worked through it as best as I could. I think it looks alright now. In the next part, part 3, I'll be dealing with the tail fins, engine assembly, and a little bit of the cockpit assembly, I would imagine. I don't know how much I'll get through, but we'll see. Like all my videos, there'll be some progress photos at the end of this for you to look at. I hope you enjoyed this part of the build. Why don't you check out part 1 and the introduction to this build, or even any of my other builds on the channel. Leave comments if you like. Subscribe to the channel if you wish. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.